Good evening, PTA members. My name is Tina Hartman, and I'm the chairman of the National PTA Bylaws and Policy Committee, and also a member of the National PTA Board of Directors. Thank you for joining the National PTA Bylaws and Policy Committee webinar on the review of the amendments that the National PTA Bylaws Committee has drafted for the proposed bylaws revision. Joining us this evening is National PTA President Laura Bay.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone, depending on the time zone you are in. This is Laura Bay, your National PTA President. I want to thank each and every one of you, first of all, for everything you do every day in your schools, in your communities, and for PTA. I also want to thank you for taking time away from either your families, from work, or even your personal time to join us tonight on this second webinar. We all invite you to listen, to provide feedback, and we hope to see you all at convention in Orlando. So without taking up any more time tonight, I am going to turn it back over to the committee and to our staff, and we're going to continue with this bylaws revision webinar. Have a good day. Thank you for your time, and I'll join you at the end of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. As Laura said, this is the second of 3 webinars that the Bylaws and Policy Committee will be holding. If you were not able to participate in the first webinar, you can view it at pta.org/bylaws. We have also updated a frequently asked questions document about National PTA's 2015 proposed bylaws revision to the website at pta.org/bylaws. This document incorporates questions that were asked on our last webinar, and we will continue to update the frequently asked questions document with additional questions after each webinar. As for our webinar tonight, this is a live webinar, and members of the National PTA Bylaws and Policy Committee will be available to answer your questions at the end of the webinar. This webinar will also be recorded so that you can refer back to it at a later date if needed, and/or share it with others. This recorded webinar will be available at pta.org/bylaws 24 to 48 hours after the webinar has ended. Please feel free to type your questions in the comment box at the right of your screen during the webinar, and we will answer questions at the end. Raleigh Cox, our parliamentarian, is also joining us for this webinar, and he will be available to answer questions at the end. However, some parliamentarian questions may be too complex to answer on this webinar. In that scenario, National PTA's Bylaws and Policy Committee members will respond to you after the webinar, and we will work to include that question in our updated frequently asked questions document. If we are not able to answer your question on tonight's webinar, please email those questions to bylawsrevision@pta.org. The National PTA Bylaws and Policy Committee has put its proposed amendments into draft form, which will be made available to you throughout the webinar series. It is important to note that the 45 days notice of amendments required in the current National PTA Bylaws found in Article 26, subsection B, does not apply in our given situation, as the motion to approve the National PTA Bylaws revision is still an open motion on the floor from the 2015 National PTA Convention. What this means is that the National PTA Bylaws and Policy Committee's proposed amendments could potentially change as we move through this webinar series and gain additional input from our membership. You will see some conforming amendments within the proposed National PTA Bylaws Committee's bylaws revision amendments. In some instances, if an amendment is adopted, it will ultimately change other areas of the bylaws, and this will permit the National PTA Bylaws and Policy Committee to make those changes without having to go through several additional amendments on the floor of the 2016 convention. National PTA Bylaws and Policy Committee member Latha Krishnair will present amendments for Article 8.
Thank you, Tina. In the National PTA proposed bylaws revision, Article 8 is titled Elections. The committee is recommending that the title of this article be changed to include the word "and appointments." The new Article 8 title would then be titled Elections and Appointments. National PTA Board of Director members are either elected or appointed, so adding the words "and appointments" to the title of this article will provide clarity and allow for inclusivity of at-large members, youth members, and those appointed to fill a vacancy. There will be one conforming amendment to this change if it is adopted. The current National PTA Nominating and Leadership Development Committee, NLDC, works very hard to recruit the future leaders of National PTA. The proposed National PTA Bylaws revision changes the name of this committee to Nominating Committee. The survey conducted last fall only offered two options: Nominating Committee or Nominating and Leadership Development Committee. 61% of respondents selected Nominating Committee as their choice for this committee name. After consulting with the current Nominating and Leadership Development Committee, or NLDC, and further National PTA Bylaws Committee discussion, the National PTA Bylaws and Policy Committee is recommending that the name Nominating Committee in the proposed National PTA Bylaws revision be changed to Nominating and Leadership Recruitment Committee, NLRC, as this more accurately describes the charge and work of this committee. There will be several conforming amendments with this change if adopted. The National PTA Bylaws and Policy Committee will further recommend that no two National PTA Nominating and Leadership Development Committee members shall be from the same state at the time elected or when appointed to fill a vacancy. This decision is in line with the survey results, as 69% of respondents to the survey felt that no two members of this committee should be from the same state. This amendment will assist in promoting increased geographic diversity on a small committee of 7 members. It would also not penalize members of the committee who may get transferred to another state for work reasons, or those who are part of our military families who often get transferred. Under Article 8, Section 2, subsection A3, the proposed National PTA Bylaws revision currently addresses only state presidents being elected to a national PTA position. There are times when an individual would need to be appointed to fill a vacancy, whether in an officer or board member capacity. The National PTA Bylaws and Policy Committee is recommending that the words "or appointed" be added after the word "elected," as this provides consistency in the process for service on the National PTA Board of Directors, since some positions are appointed. Article 8, Section 1 addresses the self-nomination process, formerly known as intent to run from the floor. The proposed National PTA Bylaws revision removes the procedures for an individual to submit their self-nomination and allows only for the procedures as prescribed in National PTA policy. National PTA policy is referring to the Governance Policy Manual, so the National PTA Bylaws and Policy Committee is proposing that this now read, "Procedures for self-nomination shall be as prescribed in the National PTA Governance Policy Manual found at pta.org. So members know where to find this document and review the procedures prior to submitting their name for nomination. Also in Article 8, the National PTA Bylaws and Policy Committee is recommending the addition of no two member representatives shall be from the same state at the time elected or when appointed to fill a vacancy. The National PTA Bylaws and Policy Committee is proposing the insertion of the words "at the time elected or when appointed to fill a vacancy," so that our military families who are often transferred, our families whose jobs transfer them to other parts of the country, will be able to complete their terms of service to National PTA as a representative of the state they lived in upon election or appointment. Should the PTA leader decide to seek election to another position, they would need to use the current state in which they live. This amendment is also in line with the survey results, as 62% of the respondents felt that no two-member representatives on the board of directors should be from the same state. National PTA Bylaws and Policy Committee Chair and Board of Directors member Tina Hartman will now present Article 9.
Thank you, Latha. The National PTA Bylaws and Policy Committee had a lot of discussion around the need for an executive committee and what the responsibilities would be for an executive committee of the National PTA. We recognized that legal counsel felt having an executive committee was important to allow emergency business to be conducted between National PTA Board of Directors meetings. After reviewing amendments that did not make it to the floor of the 2015 convention, and in talking with state leaders, the National PTA Bylaws and Policy Committee is recommending that we strike the Executive Committee in its entirety from the proposed National PTA Bylaws revision at this time. Our desire is to review the recommendations from state leaders in the survey conducted, as well as review some best practices from other nonprofit entities and within our own state congresses to allow for reconsideration of this article at the 2017 National PTA Convention. There will be conforming amendments associated with this change if adopted. National PTA Bylaws and Policy Committee member Sandy Nekoloff will present Article 11.
Thank you, Tina. In the proposed National PTA Bylaws revision, Article 11 creates a National Affiliate Advisory Council, NAAC, of which the state presidents or their designee serve as members. One of the survey questions was whether a president's designee should serve as an elected officer from their state board of directors or board of managers. 80% of those responded in the affirmative. The other survey question around the NAAC was whether the chair of the advisory council should be a member of the National PTA Board of Directors. 74% of the respondents responded in the affirmative. The National PTA Bylaws and Policy Committee is recommending that the National PTA President-elect serve as chair of this advisory council, while the vice chair and secretary be elected from among the state presidents or their designees. This change allows past practice with the National Council of States and is designed to provide a cooperative collaboration between the advisory council and the National PTA. There is also a conforming amendment associated with this change if adopted.
This concludes the second webinar in this three-part series. We would like to take our remaining time together to address any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Tina. Due to the amount of registrants on this webinar, we will only be answering questions that are submitted through the question box that is located on your webinar toolbar to the right of your screen. We will try to answer as many questions as we can with the time remaining. If you are not able to answer your questions on tonight's webinar, please feel free to submit your questions to bylawsrevision@pta.org, which is located on your screen. At this time, if you have any questions, please put them in the box. As some have noted in the question box, this full presentation, the recording of it, as well as the PowerPoints, will be uploaded to the pta.org/bylaws webpage. And everyone that has registered for this webinar will receive an email when it gets uploaded, but it's always between 24 to 48 hours. Oh, we do have a question. Will Article 11 have the word affiliate stricken from the title and added constituent inserted? Tina, would you be able to answer that question?
Sandy, do you want to field that since that was the article you discussed?
Sure, I will. The 2015 National PTA Convention delegates adopted an amendment to Article 4, affiliates, to change the word affiliate to constituent association. If the proposed National PTA Bylaws revision is adopted at the 2016 convention, this change will take effect throughout the document, unless it's amended further.
At this time, we're still not seeing any questions. If anyone has questions, please put them in the chat box. We will wait a few more minutes to see. Great, we do have another question. The question is about the exclusivity of NLDC members, if they're limited to one per state. And the question is based on the last convention and the discussion at the convention about NLDC. Should we be worried about one delegate per state or more about the qualifications for members to take part in NLDC? So to reframe the question, it would be in thinking of members to serve on NLDC, should it be based on their state or should it be based on their qualifications? Could we, let's see.
Latha, do you want to answer that?
Yes, sure. As we reported, when we sent the survey out, 69% of the respondents felt that no two members of this committee should be from the same state. And as we explained to you, this is a small committee, and limiting it to one member per state also assists in promoting the geographic diversity, since it is a very small committee. And it will also not penalize members of the committee who get transferred due to work. So that is why the recommendation is that it be one member per state.
Thank you, Latha. We have another question, and this question is for our parliamentarian. So for the amendments that were adopted at last year's convention, that were voted on and passed, do they remain in the bylaws? Do they remain in the proposed bylaws until the bylaws are completely approved to move forward?
Thank you, Josh. That's an excellent question. The amendments that were adopted at the 2015 convention are in the document that will be under resumed consideration at the 2016 convention.
Thank you, Raleigh. We still do have time for a few more questions if others have questions they'd like to ask the Bylaws Committee. And we do ask that when you submit a question in the question box, please state it in the form of a question so that it will be easier for everyone to understand the meaning of your question. In Raleigh, we have another question for you. The question is, when do the first 6 articles take effect that were started at the last convention?
Any amendments that that were adopted at the 2015 convention will not take effect until the final vote on the revision is taken, at which time any of the changes that were made through amendments will take place, except those that may have a specific proviso calling for an implementation date.
Thank you, Raleigh. We also have a question. This could be for Tina or for Raleigh. The question's on not having 45 days notice to submit your amendments. And can you explain what amendments what amendments might arise in less than 45 days time?
Tina,
Raleigh,
I will. Sure.
Okay.
At the 2016 convention, a new document is not being introduced. This is the revision that was given notice for the 2015 convention. So the document has already been given the required notice to all of the delegates. It simply has been referred to the committee to report back at the 2016 convention, at which time the committee will report its recommendations. Members may continue to debate and file primary amendments to the revision, as though there wasn't an intermission between these two conventions. And I believe the second part of the question was relating to Josh?
Actually, Riley, that was the question, just in the 45 days notice and why it's different for this time. And we have time for about 2 more questions. We do have another question. Tina, this question is for you. Will we see the full, complete documents of amendments before the convention?
Yes, we are going to post all of the amendments on our webpage. It will probably be after our final webinar, so you can look for that sometime probably in March, but be aware that those amendments can potentially an input from our PTA members, so watch that periodically because they could change.
We do have another question. This one is also for Raleigh. Does this mean that all proposed amendments at the last convention will be the same unless you have changed them in these webinar sessions?
That's an excellent question and something that should be cleared up. Any amendments that were not made on the floor at the 2015 convention are no longer, I'll say, in play. They can certainly be pre-filed again at the 2016 convention. If you might want to think of your own local unit meeting, there may be people who have wished to make a motion at that October meeting, but the time for adjournment arrived, and such motions that might not have been made at the October meeting before adjournment aren't automatically brought up at the next meeting. So no, if a motion was not made at the 2015 convention, it will not automatically arise at the 2016 convention unless a delegate pre-files it. And again, it would be subject to the amount of time available at the 2016 convention.
Thank you, Raleigh. That was a great answer. We will take a few more questions as a few more just came in. Again, this one's also for you, Raleigh. How does the first six articles amended affect our current bylaws now?
That's a very good question. They do not affect the bylaws now. The bylaws that National PTA operates under now are the current bylaws and not the revised bylaw document. No final action has been taken on the revision to the bylaws. And anything that is been amended in the revision will not take effect until the entire bylaw revision is a final vote is taken on it.
That's great, Raleigh. Thank you very much. As there are no more questions in the box, this concludes our webinar for tonight. We'd like to thank everyone for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us on this webinar. The recording of this webinar will be available at pta.org/bylaws in 24 to 48 hours. If you have additional questions after the webinar closes, or if you're not able to get to your questions at the end, please feel free to email the National PTA Bylaws and Policy Committee at bylawsrevision@pta.org. And that email is on your screen. Please write it down. If you have any additional questions, feel free to send it to us in the coming weeks. I hope everyone else has a good night. Thank you for joining us.